Welcome back to Talking Business. Apologies for the little delay. It was due to some circumstances beyond the control of my guests. But he's here, and Destiny Ovo is glad to be on the show, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. All right, now today we'll be looking at two things. First, let's look at the relevance of statistical output in economic development. Now, Destiny is a statistician and also an economist, so you could say round peg in a round hole today.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
So, the National Bureau of Statistics boss was saying that there is need for more funding in statistical inputs in order to get more output. But some may wonder, why statistics? What do we need statistics for?
Yeah.
How does that benefit the economy?
Okay.
Can we understand that?
Yeah, of course. Governance nowadays is now scientific. It's based on data, amount of information that the government has. And statistics is that machine that provides all the information, the data, that government needs to make plans, projections, and make decisions that will affect people's lives. So without data, a modern government will be working in the dark. Okay, so these statistics help us to have a measure of where we are in the scheme of things and where we want to be in future. So statistics provide that information which is necessary for planning, for analysis, for prediction, for forecasting, for backcasting, for research purposes, and there are so many uses of statistics. Yeah.
Now, in Nigeria, we do have the National Bureau of Statistics at the national level. Now, for every ministry, department, and agency, there's also a director of statistics. Each state has a director of statistics. Even at the local government level, we will have head of statistics. Now, are we making good use of this department or these areas we've created to ensure that all tiers of government has at least a unit of statistics?
Of course, like I said, the statistics is something, it's more of a cultural approach. We have the systems to collect data. But the problem we have is, as a people, as Africans, do we have a regard for a culture for keeping records? You know, do we have a culture for keeping records? Because that one is more important. It's the more prevailing question. In our private life, how many people keep a record of their maybe family tree, for instance? It starts from that basic level. How many of us can tell the name of our great-grandfather? How many of us can tell information that is 100 years behind us? So because the white man said, how much you see behind is how far you see above. Some of us do not even have our exact birthday or the birthday of our father. So in some cultures have this heavy regard for data. If you check European history, they can give you information of something that happened 3,000 years ago, the date and the day of the week and something. So for example, if you go to Google and you want to search on what day did Isaac Newton die, or when was he born, that man lived 450 years ago. They'll tell you he was born on a Wednesday, he was born on a winter afternoon, he died so day at the age of this, he died of so sickness and something like that. So they have a culture of keeping records. Now, our own culture, system of keeping records was imported to this country by the British. So this is a culture that is based on data, going to a culture that is based on heuristics, using rule of the thumb. Africans were not used to keeping hardwired data. What we're used to doing was keeping records, major events, a major rain, a major drought or something. So if you ask people who were born in this country like 100 years ago, they're going to tell you they were born around the period. They'll give you some
that happened around that time.
Period. So Africans were not used to keeping daily, hourly, minute records, things like that. But it takes time. It's a cultural problem. Over time, Nigerians are beginning to understand the importance of data in planning. So like I told you, part of the problem we are going to have is not the persistence of the systems, it's the persistence of the culture. Have we come to the culture of using intelligent data to make decisions? In our policing, do we have intelligent policing? For example, if I ask a question now, how many murders take place in Edo State every day? Put that question in Nigeria, in Benin, and put the same question in New York City. They can give you the amount of murders that take place every day in the US. Amount of those murders that take place by this killing this. If they give you the murder rate statistics alone, it could fill 5,000 volumes in a police department. How many homicides do we have? How many burglaries do we have? Things like that. So the policing in developed countries is no longer done by using heuristics or using a rule of the thumb. What they use is pure hard data. What are the facts? So when they talk a lot of facts, a lot of statistics. It's part of their culture because they know information is power. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to find a way to increase the awareness of the preponderance of data in our lives. Data is very, very important. So we need to sell it. First of all, we need to sell the culture of keeping records, of keeping up-to-date records. It is very important on every level, in our policing, in our community development, in our infrastructural development, in our interactions, in our personal lives. We must keep record of events because they help us to check what we call trend analysis. If you have data of your life for the last 10 years and you're able to put it on a wall, on a platform, and then you look at it, you'll be shocked at a pattern. There's a pattern to everything. Now, most people live in what we call the zigzag life. Like they don't understand that everything follows a particular mathematical fashion. Even your life. For instance, if you're able to keep records of what your habits are for just 3 months and look at it, something will happen to you. You will begin to alter what will happen in the next 3 months.
Because you studied the pattern.
You studied it. You know, there's a Google survey that showed people just using GPS system to track what people do over a period of 1 year. They were shocked to discover that 97% of human beings do the same things every day for 1 year. It explains why some people do not make progress in life. You wake up in the morning, you go to work, you just live a secular life. Now, if you're able to map your movements for only 6 years and show it to you, you may sit down and look at it and say, what have I been doing? And want to alter it. But most of us, we live inside the data itself. We provide the data with ourselves, and we don't have a hard way of looking at it from a glance. And then because of that, we tend not to have strategic thinking, like looking at how to get away from the regular pattern into another pattern.
Now, let's bring it to the economic sense now. Yesterday, the stock market closed trading on a positive note due to the NBS reports that the GDP had improved by 5%. Now, if individuals making investments could use that, how should we use that in governance, in making economic policies?
Yes, of
Because
course.
the NBS turns out information all the time about different aspects of the economy.
Yes, of course. The data the NBS presents and the CBN is actually what we call, they are public goods, general use data. You know, what you do with the data depends on what you want to get. The data is like the sun. The sun can be used for drying clothes, for powering plants, for solar energy and things like that. So the data is general purpose use. Now, for you to make decisions based on that data, the NBS data, you have to be an expert, or you have to consult an expert. You have to consult an expert or somebody who knows how to use that particular data. For example, if I give you data on the economy of Nigeria, the GDP, the inflation rate, unemployment rate, and things like that, if you are not an economist, you may not be able to understand the meaning of those data. Okay. Now, if they give you stock market data, if you don't have basic finance knowledge, it may not mean anything to you. If they tell you market capitalization and you don't know what it is, they tell you what is the All-Share Index. These are simple variables. So sometimes you may need a little expert information to process a data to the layman's language. So like I told you, data is general purpose. They are normally stated in hard facts, in language, statistical language. But if an organization wants to use such data, sometimes they have to adapt it to the language of the organization, or sometimes they have to interpret the data to fit their own particular problems. So that requires some expert analysis, and that is where it comes in. So the data you have there have several applications. If I can use it for research, for instance, I want to check the trend analysis of Nigeria's economic growth for the last 20 years. I can go to the NBS and obtain the statistics from there. Somebody else may not be interested in that. He may want to understand what is the persistence of the data over time. For example, want to look at the regression over time. What is the rate at which inflation, at what point in time does inflation change? Also, is looking for other patterns.
It depends on your need.
Yes, the need of the data user. determines which statistics is relevant and whether to manipulate data to fit the model he wants to develop. So it depends on use. But generally, it's a general use case when you see the data with the NBS or CBN. Yes.
Okay. So going forward, what should we be doing with this output? Because the NBS is asking for more funding. Now, to justify that more funding, what should the government be doing with the data supplied?
Yes.
What should even businesses be doing so that if you're putting in more fund and then you're getting more output, that should go somewhere as regards development?
Yes, like the amount of data the NBS can generate in Nigeria is a function of the amount of resources given to the organization to develop data.
Okay.
Like I told you, if the country values data, then it invests heavily on it. You know, data provides the input for research. Now, a country that is run on research, on think tank economics, for example, you want to make this, you want to plan for the economy for the next 30 years, and you want to use what we call sentiment, you may just make those plans for nothing. But if you use smart data, then the economy will move on a trajectory. Okay. So, like we said, if the government values data, then it must, one, invest heavily on data acquisition, data processing. There are so many aspects. Okay. The data collection systems alone should be well advanced, to cater to the entire population. The data processing systems, that's another field entirely. Okay. You are going to manage those data. So you need a lot of experts, a lot of economists, a lot of statisticians to help you analyze and process the data in a way that anybody in the world can access the data and use it for decision making. Okay. Then when it comes to using the data itself, we need to entrench into our culture. For example, when preparing budgets, we normally have forecasts and things like that. We must rely on the data supplied by these bodies. Now, from the community level to the local government level to the state government level, we must find a way to have this data harmony. Okay. You know, the problem is that sometimes there's duplicity of data. Different organizations can keep unrelated data, like the NIM thing that we're doing now. We normally, banks have information about everybody that has a bank account. Okay. Now, the NIM is about the government. Then we have driver's license. If you have a driver's license, then that's another set of data. Then if you have what they call a passport, international passport, that's another set of data.
There should be some
so there must be some synergy. There must be some synchronization of this data to have a data so that we don't have duplication of data. So we can work with a central data unit. So that
have some form of data
bank, so that everybody can access the data. It is there's no redundant data. When I say redundant data, what that means is that data persisting itself in multiple places and with meaningless value. But if you have a data point that everybody can access and you can connect an individual to that data point, then it becomes more usable for planning and for forecasting. Okay. So government has to find a way to network all the data points together into one big umbrella and put everybody within the data bank. Yes.
Okay. Let's leave statistical outputs and data collection, data gathering for a while. Leave it for now. Yeah. Now that the NBS has a new boss, let's see what happens with data input and data output in Nigeria and how well it is being used by government, business owners, and everyone towards development. So now let's talk about the economic recovery and growth plan.
Yes.
Now, after the 2016 recession and negative growth at the end of the year, now this economic recovery and growth plan, 2017 to 2020, was created, and with lots of hope for it.
Of course.
There were targets it was supposed to meet. So let's have an assessment of that at the end of 2020. How well do you think that's ERGP 2017 to 2020 fared?
Overall, if I was to put a score, it failed woefully. First of all, the basis to assess a plan, you need to check first of all the objectives, and then you need to check the projections. Okay. On the major projections in that plan, it failed on all fronts.
Projections, you mean
the data,
talking about reducing unemployment, inflation, like and of course the projection for oil production.
Yes, so you are going to compare actual versus projection. And on all fronts, on the main headline rates, it failed. On GDP, it predicted 7% growth rate. The highest we ever had was 2.4%. It has hovered between 0% and 2% in the last 3 years. It did not work. On inflation, we benched it at 9.9%. The average inflation rate within the period was between 13% and 18% off the mark. On unemployment, it was pegged at about 11%. The unemployment rate that I speak to you is between 33% and 35%. 3 times the projection, off the mark again. You see, on all fronts, all the data fronts, it failed miserably.
Now, why did it fail? Why did it fail?
Yes, there can be explanations. There are stochastic explanations that has to do with the COVID-19, things like that.
And before also COVID-19, it ran from 2017 to 2020. Yes. COVID was yet to surface at 2017.
Yes, of course, you're right. But there was a recession. The plan was supposed to take Nigeria out of the recession and put us on footing.
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, I think they were too ambitious with the plan in the first place. Your economy had 2 quarters recession.
Okay.
The first thing you should try to do is to try and get out of recession in a very sustainable way. But they were making projections 7%. If you have negative growth from -3%, you need to get to -2 to -1 before you get to 1, 2. Okay. Now you move from that. In 3 years, how do you do that? If you understand what a recession is, a recession normally takes between 3 to 5 years, a recession of that type,
okay,
to take people out of that recession. But we had a 3-year rolling plan, and then we planned that we should hit 7%. It was too ambitious, first of all, to start with. Secondly, the objective was that we want to diversify the economy. The language, that word diversification that we always talk about, we've been saying that for the last 40 years. It's not something it's not a 3-year plan. To diversify Nigeria, you need billions of dollars of investment. You need at least 20 years plan to diversify Nigeria away from oil.
Okay.
Since 1956, oil was discovered in this country till now. Our main product has been oil. Okay. Now, if you are dependent on the product for 50 years, now to diversify people away from it, there's a cultural aspect of it. People have become so used to oil that the economics of oil trumps every cultural consideration.
Okay.
So as it is now, people will go for what is easier to get. Crude oil is easy to drill from the ground and sell. But to diversify Nigeria, you need to have what we call a manufacturing technological orientation.
Okay.
We must look at manufacturing, services, high-value services. But Nigerians have been wired to pursue rent. To seek rent means we look for easy money, oil money, something you just drill, you sell. Nigerians are not great at production in terms of manufacturing and industrial capacity. Happily, luckily, we now have people who are going into that area. The Boa Cement Group, the Dangote Cement Group, and things. These are hard products. It requires,
but it's not widespread.
It's not widespread.
It's just like
yes,
very
here and there,
firms.
here and there. So what we expect to see is that in the next 20, 30 years, Nigeria should be going into production of cars, production of computers, production of hardware, real hard stuff production.
Okay, so that's the way we would have been able to achieve
that
diversification.
That's the only way to do that. Now, if we cannot achieve that because of our basic STEM education is very poor, we don't have basic industrial capacity, we don't have industrial knowledge, there's another way out. We can go through pure services. That's the route India and some other countries took. We can go into software technology.
Investment in human capital.
In human capital.
But that was also part of the plan for the 2017, 2020.
Yes, I did come to the studio. I did come to the studio about a year ago, and I told you the approach the government is using to solve that human capacity problem is very weak. Like I told you, government was looking at it from the palliative perspective, like giving people millions of money to run businesses and things like that. That's not how we should look at it. They are what's called hard skills. Hard skills, one, if you're able to train a Nigerian, one Nigerian to become a pilot, it is more important than training 50 farmers.
Okay, so what's the business sense in that?
The business sense is that you train people according to high earning skills.
Okay.
High earning skills. There's a little guy that works with Google now. He's worth $200 million. He's a small boy. He's just an 11-year-old boy, because he's a network specialist. He's a software engineer.
Okay.
At 11, it's not about age. You must check where the world is going to. The world is going into internet technology, going into software. You need a truck to ship cement. What? 50 million naira. You need about 50 trucks to do that. But to ship software, what, $3 trillion, you can put $3 trillion worth of software in one small box.
Okay.
So the era of moving things, massive movement of things from one place to another, that kind of old industrial brick and mortar economy is becoming redundant. Just develop a software and download it from anywhere in the world, and then you can generate billions of dollars. The world is no longer, we are not having what we call intellectual capital. That type of capital is where we should invest our resources on. We have a population of 206 million people. Out of these, 65 million are between the ages of 20 and 55. These are young people. They may not be able to build factories, but they can't keep those factories in their head through software designs and things like that. So there are skills the government should be investing on. ICT skills, software engineering, basic engineering in form of fabrication and others. We do not need to know how to make a Toyota car in the 21st century. All we need to know is just to know how to make a tire.
And that would just
or make a small part of it
edge that we
and
have.
Specialize in that. Are you getting the point now? We don't need to build big systems. What we just need is study the system, check the parts where you can have advantages. Be known for producing only one small part of it, just the keys, for instance. Okay. Nigeria can take advantages in some certain aspects of production plants, and will be known for that.
Okay, so that's where the investment in human capital.
Yes, you need to put people there because you have a lot of people. Some countries like Canada has just 50 million people. Nigeria has 206 million people. In a country where we have population with a growth rate of 3%, by 2050 will be 400 million people in this country. What the biggest investment you can make is human capital, capacity of people to think and generate income from within themselves, not in structures and roads and schools. Do you understand that?
Let's look at the projection for 2021 to 2025.
Yes.
Now, there's been a gap, a 10-month gap since the first Economic and Recovery Group Plan expired last year. So now the government is looking at another plan from 2021, which it will launch in October, to 2025, as announced by the Minister of State for Finance, Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba. So now the government is looking at lifting at least 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. In lifting people out of poverty, which is the core of the plan, how should that be? You've talked about investments in human capital.
Okay.
But people need food. If you're investing in capital, human capital, that may take a long time for the gains to be achieved. How should it go?
Okay, first of all, the dream of lifting 100 million people out of poverty in a couple of years is unattainable. I must tell you that we have to be very objective. 100 million people out of poverty in 3, 4, 5 years is easy on paper. We should stop having ambitious goals. Let's not do that. 100 million people, that's half a population in just 5 years. It's not possible. We've had Vision 2020. We have 2004 needs assessment. We had sustainable investment. Nigeria is very good on having plans. Like I told you, we have so many plans in this country. They are very ambitious. We say we want to achieve power sustainability by 2030. Because we hear these things on TV, we hear white people say it. It's not so. You have to be very objective. You have to check the fundamentals. What do you have on ground that will make you lift 100 million people out of poverty?
Maybe they're looking at social investment programs.
It will not work. It will not work. I have to say that. If there's a government official listening to me, it's not good. What's social investment program? The best way to lift people out of poverty is to help them lift themselves out of poverty, not giving them money to lead them. Okay, let me tell you something. If you are a medical doctor and then you have 6 people in your family depending on you, they didn't go to school, they don't have skills, how does only you help all of them? Which one is easier? You train all of them to become experts in what they are doing, and then you let them take care of themselves. Which one do you think will make the family richer in the long run? You become the rich guy, the big brother, which is the government now, that gives money to your brothers, 16 brothers that you have. Anytime they need money, they come to you. You are giving them palliatives. You are feeding them. Or you take a break. You take all of them to 3 months training programs to make them able to feed themselves. Which one do you think is more sustainable in the long run?
In the long run, that's more sustainable. But should there be a form of medium-term kind of palliative system to have boats?
Yes.
Can we run boats?
Yes. While you do that, you should invest most of your money into developing skills for those people. Okay? Because let me tell you, the problem is this. You have to look for a trade-off between the short term and the long term. In the short term, what people need is just basic existence. So you need to allocate some funds towards that area. But your strategic focus should be on the long-term welfare of these people. That requires you to make investments in education and skills. There's no shortcut to solving poverty problems. All poverty is caused by ignorance of some sort. All poverty is caused by ignorance of some sort. Ignorance in knowledge and ignorance in skills and potentials. All you need to do is this. Give me 500 doctors. And I'll tell you that all the 500 doctors, out of the 500 doctors, 490 will be millionaires at 50. Because the skills they have are developed skills. Okay? Give me 8,000 pilots, and I'll give you 7,999 millionaires at 50. Give me 10,000 software designers. I'll give you 9,800 millionaires at 50. Because those skills, people pursue it with money.
They're in high demand.
They're in high demand. It's very simple. Just make skills people. You solve the poverty problem. It will disappear. It will disappear. But if you keep giving people money, trying to peter them, take care of them, pamper them, don't worry, we are all human beings. We call it socialism. Nigeria is not a socialist country. Nigeria is a country that wants to become a giant in the next 50 years. We have a capitalist mentality. people must grow up to understand that as an adult, you must learn to take care of yourself, even when government is taking care of its own functions.
Okay.
That means every single citizen must be productive. So the total sum of our production is what we call our national wealth. It is not why some people are producing, why other people are complaining that the economy is bad. Everybody should be taught to get to work, enterprise, and get to work and take each of us out of poverty. Now, if each person gets out of poverty by his personal effort or by the government assistance in terms of providing the environment for you to operate, then it's easy to take 100 million people out of poverty in the next 10 years if everybody is taught basic skills on how to fend for themselves.
So in other words, the social investment program should be restructured.
It should be restructured in a way.
Serve as some form of palliative,
yes,
but building capacity for people.
Yes, except it's in the area of helping people to build capacity. Okay, there's a simple model. You want somebody to come and learn certain skills. He doesn't have money. So you say, okay, every week I give you money for feeding. But you pay 80 to 100,000 for the skills. So you can, the palliative should be to make the person survive till they obtain that skill. But to have a palliative economy is useless in the 21st century. There's no economy that is built on palliatives that will last long. Because one man's, anytime you see a person poor, somebody is getting rich from that person. So we must find a way to expand, to redistribute income from the rich to the poor, empowering the poor to empower themselves so that they can get to that place where everybody can be happy.
Okay, on a final note, mindset and then having the collaboration of people with government, because for quite a while now, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, some persons have been used to the social investment programs of giving cash to sustain monthly, you know, the palliative system kind of. Now, is there a way to ensure compliance? Now, if government is coming with some form of training, skill acquisition, is there a way to ensure compliance that at the end of the day, the goal to create human capacity will be achieved?
That's why we have data. That's why we have the statistical bodies. That's why we have monitoring bodies. So government is to design the policy to ensure that it's running, but there should be monitoring bodies to ensure that the goals, the objectives are met. So if you are going to train, you say you want to train 1 million people in certain skills, there must be a monitoring system. And there should be timelines. So in 3 months, what is the progress rate? Okay, if you are going to give them money to start businesses, how much we are giving these people that you gave the money to, what exactly are they doing with it? That's the role of the press. The press should come and follow those government programs. You see, government cannot do everything. Government we design policies and put things in place. But it is civil society organizations, the press, and a lot of bodies who follow these things up to see to what extent are these government policies being adhered to. Because if government creates 1 million jobs and they gave 1 million naira to each person to start a business and nobody follows up, there's no information, no feedback or something.
Or back to square one.
Then we get back to the story, say what happened to the money. But if you follow up, you say, okay, out of this 1,000 people, they followed about 600 people, you check them over a period of 5 years, you see that they are doing better, then government will be encouraged to do more. So that's where information comes in, data and information. Yes.
Okay, a nice place to leave the discussion today. Thank you, Destiny Ogbufo.
Thank you for having me, and I apologize for coming a little bit late.
Apology accepted. My name is Blessing AJ. I will see you next week. Stay safe.